Good afternoon, and welcome to the Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host. I'm pleased to have so many of you with us today. Keep sending that invitation to your friends. Let's enlarge the group. I told you at the beginning of Israel's war against Hamas, we're not doing battlefield analysis. We're not doing day-to-day operations. There are other places that do that. Our goal here is to bring a broader framework to events in the region, not only in Israel, but across the Middle East and beyond. And in addition to geographic considerations, there is also the fact that there's a clock running here. The Biden administration appears to be losing patience with Israel, not with Hamas, not with Qatar, not with the ICJ or the UN. It is losing patience with Israel. And that has to have an impact on Israel's thinking. And that's where we are today. So Israel is determined not only to destroy Hamas's military and governing capability, to secure its people, and to bring home the hostages, living and sadly not living, but also to prevent a return to the situation of October 6th, before the deluge. This requires not only battlefield prowess, but also long-range management capabilities. And that requires some out-of-the-box thinking. Does Israel give Gaza to Hamas, to UNRWA, to UN peacekeepers, to a US EU multinational force? That's where today's guest comes in. So I am pleased to bring Professor Efraim Inbar back to our series. He's one of the true experts in Israel's national security plans and programs. Before we get to Efraim, here is your JPC commercial. The JPC was founded in 1985 as a nonprofit organization, providing analysis of foreign and domestic policy. We support a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Aside from our security interests, the JPC advocates for small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, free speech, and intellectual diversity. Right now, however, our goal is to support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anybody who would deny those things. And now more than ever, we support the government of Israel and the IDF in defending the people. You can find us on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. There you can read our insight articles, our magazine In Focus. You can also binge watch our previous webinar programs. Some people do. And now our guest, Professor Efraim Inbar, is president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He's an expert on Israeli strategic doctrine, Israeli public opinion as it regards security issues, U.S. Middle East policy, Israeli-Palestinian diplomacy, such as it is, and Israel-Turkey relations, such as they are. He was also the founding director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, known to many of you as the Bessa Center. Efraim is a professor of political studies at Bar-Ilan University in Israel, and he is a man of the academic world. He has been a visiting professor at Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, and Boston University, visiting scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center, a NATO fellow, and a visiting fellow at London's International Institute for Strategic Studies. He's the author of a number of books, including one that I think you should read called Outcast Countries in the World Community, and other ones. He holds an MA and a PhD from the University of Chicago after finishing undergraduate studies at Hebrew University. Efraim Inbar, I'm happy to have you back with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Shoshana. I'm happy to be with you. I understand that you received several questions about the subject or the title. And indeed, I recommended to let PA take Gaza after the day after. And it was probably surprising to hear that for me, particularly people that know my views and my positions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And before I explain my recommendation, let us go over, the basic positions of the main actors involved in this in the Gaza war. First of all, what is the day after? The day after is basically what the day after IDF, the Israeli army leaves Gaza. And as you probably know, as was enunciated by Netanyahu, the prime minister, Israel is not interested in staying in Gaza. I think for good reason. Who wants to be in Gaza? It's not the nicest place in the world, and it's also dangerous. You know, somebody doesn't like you, you may get killed. So the question was already at the beginning of the war, what is the day after? And Israel, for I'm not sure, but the best reasons, refused to give an answer to this question. What do we want in Gaza? First of all, as mentioned by Shoshana, destruction of the Hamas military capabilities, which is an achievable military goal, a commendable goal, and to restore deterrence. After we failed, we had a deterrence failure of such magnitude, we have to make clear to anybody that if you attack Israel, it is costly. And I think the destruction of Hamas should be a costly affair for the Gazans. And I'm not sure that it is costly enough, but this is what should happen. Also, Israel has no illusions, or particularly this government, has no illusions about the Palestinians. We are fully aware that they are not the nicest neighbor. And military force is not going to change that, at least not in the near future. We cannot achieve also what the United States achieved at the end of World War II in Germany, to create a new Germany, or to create a new Japan. I think the American adventures in the Middle East, in Iraq, Afghanistan, showed that those people are of a different type and do not lend themselves to political engineering as Germans or the Japanese were. Therefore, what Israel wants is only a very modest thing: freedom of military action after the day after. After we leave Gaza, we understand that there will be some people that would like to kill Israelis and Jews, and there will be not too much resistance by whoever will rule there, and therefore we need military freedom of military action in order to go there and mow the grass. This is what we need in our with our Palestinian neighbors. We also want, I think it would be good if it would be a shorter war. It's economically too expensive for us. And we shouldn't forget that we have to deal with another neighbor, Hezbollah in the north. And probably the sooner the better. And I have advocated for several years already a preemptive attack on Lebanon, and now they attacked us, and I think it's clear who the aggressor is. What does the US want, or the Biden administration? First of all, to end the war as quickly as possible. For them, escalation is a bad word. In some situation, escalation is something desirable, but not for the Americans at this time. Moreover, it seems that the war in Gaza causes domestic complications for the president that is running for re-election. So they want to end the war as quickly as possible. At the same time, however, they don't want Hamas to come back to Gaza because this administration is obsessed with a two-state solution. They believe that this is the key to a future peaceful Middle East. And therefore, of course, they don't want Hamas because Hamas opposes the PA. They threw PA personnel from the few high-rises in Gaza, and they are the opposition to the PA. So they want the Israelis to try to get rid of Hamas and to try to build what they call, the Americans, it's a curious term, a revitalized PA. It's not a question about vitamins, of course, but they think that they will be able to change the ways the natives do business. And of course, this is a hopeless enterprise. They tried before by the Americans. The Bush administration, if you remember, tried to change the PA when Arafat was at its head. And we know how successful this American effort was. Also, this administration is very ambitious. It wants a new security architecture in the Middle East to bring everybody under the American umbrella, which is not seen as a very secure one in the Middle East. And for that, they want the Saudis inside and the Palestinian state, and of course, Israel to be part of that. And to some extent, of course, they need Israel to make the deal with Saudi Arabia kosher. What does the Hamas want? First of all, they want a multi-front war. And to some extent, they were successful. They brought in Hezbollah, the Houthis, even Iran directly, which was a surprise. They want to strengthen the Mukawama, the resistance narrative. And probably by now, when they see that they are to a large extent militarily defeated, and the world doesn't want Hamas to rule over Gaza, they probably will go for a Hezbollah model, some kind of military presence of Hamas in Gaza, governed by some kind of government that will have no choice but to go along with Hamas wishes. And if eventually a two-state solution will be implemented, when we'll have a Palestinian state, which I doubt, but they plan to take over that state and continue to be a proxy of Iran. What does the PA want? The PA wants Hamas defeat. They are very happy that we are doing the job for them. And whatever they say, doesn't matter. Hamas is a mortal enemy of Fatah and the PA. And of course, they also want a weakened Israel in order to be able to extract more concessions from whatever Israeli government will appear after the war. We should also be aware that the PA does not want to be an Iranian proxy. It had other plans. They prefer European and American money to Iranian money. There is good thinking in this type of opposition. What the rest of the Arabs want, the moderate states, all of them want Hamas defeated. Hamas is a danger for them because it's an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim brothers are not very popular in the Arab world, with the exception of Qatar. So they want the defeat with Hamas. Maybe one exception is Egypt. Curiously, Egypt seems to prefer a weak Hamas, like Netanyahu, because a weak Hamas is a thorn in Israel's back, and they don't want a too strong Israel. It is a competitor with them. It is a regional game, for hegemony or whatever. All Arab countries are, to some extent, happy that this war is taking place, because it brings back the United States to the Middle East. We know the saying, you don't want to be in the Middle East, you don't want to war, those things come after you. So the retreat of the United States from the Middle East is actually averted by this war. And it seems that they are not, in a hurry to end the war, because they do not, we'll speak a bit about later, they are not offering any troops to go to Gaza. What does Iran want? And Iran is an important actor. Of course, a prolonged war is weakening Israel. And this is what Hamas is doing. I think to some extent with Israeli help, that we are not moving faster in attaining our goals. They divert attention from the Iranian nuclear program, the war, clearly, weaken the US and its allies, and demonstrate the Iran ability to disturb the Middle East. They did it in Gaza, they did it via the Houthis in the Red Sea, at a key location. So under these circumstances, it's quite clear we do not want to stay in Gaza. The longer we stay, the more criticism we attract, particularly on the humanitarian issue. We didn't think about it seriously before the war. And of course, our instinct was clear. Why should we feed the Gazans after what they did to our citizens? And it's not only the armed Gazans. There were many civilians that participated in raping, in stealing from Israeli homes. So this distinction between non-involved and involved is not very exact in the Gazan case. Also, a longer war obviously deteriorates, brings to a deterioration in US-Israeli relations, which were, in any case, a bit tense because of the positions of the Biden administration on Middle Eastern issues, particularly the two-state solution. And this war, actually the interim period, becomes the day after. Actually, what we thought that the day after is after we leave Gaza, it's already now. And we have not prepared for the interim solution. And this is a problem for us. What are the options for this interim period, or what we call the day after? The Israeli thinking initially was local leaders. We tried this thing in the West Bank. It didn't work. We tried it in Gaza to give a role to the notables. After all, it is a traditional society with notables. It didn't work because Hamas had enough of a presence to kill those notables that were ready to serve their people as an alternative to Hamas. So this doesn't work. And of course, Hamas is ruthless in their attempt to prevent anything but Hamas influence in Gaza. Another option, which is a sort of humor, is UN troops. UN troops have been in the Middle East for many years. They were never effective. When they were needed, they ran away, disappeared. And the clear example, in the north is UNIFIL. UNIFIL is totally useless. Its mandate was to prevent smuggling weapons from Syria to Hezbollah and to prevent Hezbollah to going south of the Litani River. They failed in both these tasks. So a UN force is allowing the strongest party in Gaza to take over, basically. Arab troops. There was another idea, to bring Arabs. Actually, it's not a bad idea, because Arabs could deal better with Gazans by Arab methods. But they are not coming. They don't want to fight Hamas. I actually understand them. And we don't see, volunteers, any countries volunteering for this job. I'm not sure it will be good for us if they are coming, because then we'll have to go inside once in a while to take care of the Hamas terrorists, and this will create tension between us and the countries, the Arab countries that send their troops. It will endanger the Abraham Accords. I think it would be an Israeli folly to accept for the day after and some kind of multi-Arab forces in Gaza. There is another idea, floating in Washington now, which is a multinational force similar to the force that exists in Sinai. There is a big difference. In Sinai, there are no people that are after the multinational force, no Hamas. The Egyptians are fighting their Islamic insurgency with Israeli help. And I don't see those forces in Sinai or something similar to them, fighting Hamas. There is a sovereign country there. In Gaza, there is no sovereign. So also it should be US commanded. So why should we get in trouble with the US? We are enough in trouble with the US. And actually the PA, the United States, want something else. They want the PA to go in. Because for them, for Washington, with their obsession of the two-state solution, they think they bringing back the PA into Gaza will strengthen the two-state solution. And it will be a beginning of a Palestinian state. Actually, it will probably be a beginning of a civil war in Gaza between the PA and Hamas, which is not so bad for us. And indeed, in my view, the PA fits the bill to go into Gaza for several reasons. First reason, because they don't like Hamas. And they are ready, not always very efficiently, mostly inefficiently, to fight Hamas. This is what they're doing in the West Bank. They are anti-Iran. They are the favorite of the US. We could please Washington while keeping freedom of military action. What we should try to do is to duplicate the situation in the West Bank in Gaza. In the West Bank, we have the Palestinian Authority and freedom of military action. We go in, there is some cooperation. If you've heard, what happened, the terrorist turned himself to the PA security forces, and obviously he was released after a few days, a revolving door. If we count the number of terrorists apprehended by the PA and by us, the ratio is quite clear. 2/3 by IDF, about 1/3 by the Palestinians, and as I mentioned, they have a revolving door. The PA is weak, corrupt, ineffective, partly cooperates with Israel. And I think the West Bank model is the best we can get in Gaza. The international community, including the Arab states, who need a fig leaf, they can say this is the beginning of a two-state solution. Even if Israel doesn't commit himself. Although I don't think it should be a problem to commit ourselves, to a thing that is not going to happen anytime soon. Actually, the PA, and I can, I'm not ready to guarantee many things, but this I can guarantee to you. They will fail in Gaza exactly as they failed in the West Bank. What will do an additional failure of the Palestinian national movement in Gaza? I'm not sure. Will there be any learning curve on part of the Palestinians, on part of the international community? Maybe. I'm not sure about it. Collectives generally learn very slowly. However, we should also remember that when we withdraw the day after from Gaza, it will be an opportunity to bargain with the United States. You want the PA in, you want our cooperation? Fine, we have some conditions. Let's start talking about what revitalized means. I don't understand why the Israeli government does not enter this endless dialogue. What happens if we'll talk about them? Well, let's assume we demand change of education system. Will it happen? No. But we can bargain over it for many months, for years. We can start discussing, for example, the new agreement over US long-range support. When we decide to leave, this is a good bargaining position vis-a-vis the United States. They don't want chaos. The Americans fear a chaotic situation, a Somalia-type situation in Gaza. I'm not sure that for Israel it's so terrible. But if the Americans don't want it, let's try to get something out of it. So therefore, I think that it would be a mistake not to go along with American whims on this issue. And as I guarantee to you, it will fail. And maybe a West Bank situation will probably what happened. And this is a most suitable situation. Peace is not an option. We don't have nice neighbors that are willing to give up their dream to destroy the Jewish state. Therefore, we have to be pragmatic and not ideological. I'll end at this point, ready to take questions.
And we have questions. I forgot to mention that you were the ultimate cynic, because basically what you're saying is you take the option that works, even if it doesn't work. So I'm going to try to put some of the questions together.
I have no illusions. I have no illusions.
That's probably the best way to do things, especially when people's lives are at stake. So without illusions. So essentially you said that the best outcome for Israel would mimic the situation on the West Bank in Judea and Samaria, that the PA has a certain amount of control and the Israeli government and military also has a certain amount of control to protect things. Talk to us then. You are the author of the concept of mowing the grass. How's it working in Judea and Samaria? Is the situation, in your view, deteriorating? Is Iran making inroads? I mean, what's going on the West Bank that should make us feel comfortable that the same situation can apply in Gaza?
I admit my sin, mea culpa. I authored the article about mowing the grass. I'm actually proud of it because I think this is what we are doing in the West Bank. And it is successful. To give you two examples. One, the West Bank did not erupt in an intifada during 8 months of war. Hamas also was not successful because of our efforts to make trouble in Jerusalem, particularly during the Ramadan months. It was quiet. Basically, we were mowing the grass. We arrested many Palestinians, a few hundred, more than a few hundred. We killed a few bad guys, and the West Bank is relatively quiet. So mowing the grass in the West Bank does work, despite the fact that Iran and Hamas try to foment trouble.
So there's a question. Sorry, go ahead. There was a question about that, that Iran and Hamas are trying to foment trouble. And someone has asked us, is Iran making inroads? They are also threatening Jordan. Are we looking at a potential backdoor entry into the West Bank by Iran?
Of course they try. They try to smuggle weapons. And we have an ally, by the way, on this issue, which is Jordan. Jordan tries to prevent having the West Bank an Iranian proxy. So we should remember that Jordan participated in the defense of Israel. It was a unique moment because they have a clear interest And by the way, the enemy of the Hashemite dynasty is the Palestinian national movement, and they know it. And it doesn't matter what they say. So mowing the grass has been successful in the recent months, difficult months in the West Bank. I want to say something about mowing the grass in Gaza. The policy of the Netanyahu government, the strategy, I think was a good one, to try to have a weak Hamas in Gaza in order to weaken the Palestinian national movement. This was a good strategy, in my view. It was badly implemented because we didn't mow enough the grass. We allowed Hamas to grow. We had a policy of containment, which is a bad policy. To give you the gist of it, we didn't want a larger war, and what happened? We gave them time to arm themselves, to build tunnels. We allowed them to increase the lethality of their attacks over time. They had missiles with larger warheads. They increased the range of their missiles, and we contained. Actually, we allowed the Hamas to increase the doses of use of force against us, and Israel and the whole world got used to it. We allowed this situation because we didn't mow the grass enough. This is the main reason for what happened on October 7th. And we should do it, we can do it in Gaza if we act smartly and do not contain all the time.
Good point. So we, people in the United States, and maybe people in Israel also, tend to look at the Palestinian Authority as an entity, as a government, but it's not a very stable one by itself. Abbas is not stable. The setup isn't stable. And what makes us think, or what should make us think, that the Palestinian Authority in a recognizable form is going to continue here, that it's something that Israel will be able to work with in the future? What happens when Abbas goes? Eventually, he has to go.
I come from the land of the prophets, but I'm not a prophet. I don't know what will happen. But I think that we should not exaggerate our influence over developments in the Palestinian political body. We may see the guys with the guns taking over. Maybe we'll see a triumvirate between various security branches. We may see a civil war. But what can we do? I think that our ability to influence what's happening in Area A is very limited. What we can do is basically to mow the grass. Unfortunately, Israel does not have too many options. We can bribe a few people. By the way, I prefer the PA to Hamas because we can bribe some of them. You know, the dangerous people are the ideologues that cannot be bribed. Only very few instances of bribing Hamas people. In the West Bank, it's easier. We have to understand in what kind of environment we live in. So the PA, I think I'm not sure we made a mistake at Oslo, but that's for domestic reasons. But doesn't matter. That's the situation now. And our options are limited. We only can limit the damage.
So do you plan to, or do you think you could talk to the United States, for example, Palestinian Authority leadership has continued inciting violence against Israel. They've talked about an intifada. They haven't, you're right, they haven't created an intifada, but they still do very, very damaging things. And they, for example, decided they're going to pay salaries as they do to the guys who did October 7th. So these people are going to now take over Gaza to some extent. Can you see yourself talking to the US about restrictions, about they have to change certain things before they get to take over? Or do we just accept them the way they are?
No, I want to talk to the Americans, of course. I don't want to make the American life too easy.
Okay, that's good. We don't want to make America's
We'll
life
talk
too
about those things. Do I think that the Americans have the influence to change? You know, the PA is bankrupt, and they continue to pay to the terrorists' families. I think this is something very important to them. And probably they believe that the stupidity of the West will allow the money to continue to flow. And they're right.
They're right about that. Money is flowing.
Yeah, I agree. They're right about that. I think since Oslo, the Palestinians have the greatest outside support per capita in the world. Despite being anti-Semites, despite inciting Israel, despite supporting terror, turning a blind eye to terrorists. Yes, they were successful.
Not altogether successful. The foreign minister of the UAE said last week, the Palestinian leadership are like Alibaba and the 40 thieves. They're useless, and therefore replacing them with one another will only lead to the same result. Now, he's not wrong either. Have the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia have cut their support to the Palestinians by 70 or 80%, which is probably a good sign, but that gets made up by Europeans and Americans. So are the Gulf states still attached to the idea that Israel has to be supported, even quietly, even behind the scenes? Are the Gulf states still there for you?
Of course, the Gulf states, you know, was the glue between us and the Gulf states is Iran. And as Iran becomes stronger, the glue will become stronger if we win this war. If we don't win it, they may bandwagon. They may go and have better relations with Iran. We see already some signs of it. They play it safe.
So this is really important because you talked about this war has sort of stopped the American departure from the region, and you want to stop the American departure from the region. You want us to be there. In some ways, I do too, but most of what the US government is doing now supports the interest of Iran. And then I start to worry. They don't want the Europeans to condemn Iran for its nuclear breakthroughs. We don't want to punish Hezbollah. We talked to Israel about leaving Hamas alone. We're doing a lot of things that support Iran. If I were the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Oman and Bahrain and, you know, I'd have to worry about us, meaning the United States. Without the United States, does Israel have enough control of the region to keep those guys as your friends and allies?
I fully agree with you. I think the United States is making huge mistakes in its foreign policy. Yeah, allowing, you know, they have a clear rule. Nobody should attack Iran. Iran can attack anybody, but Iran should be spared of any attack. Don't forget, President Biden said don't. And they did. And what happened? Nothing. So I think the American behavior is undermining American deterrence and the trust of its natural allies in the Middle East in a defense agreement with the United States. Yeah, I fully agree. And I think that this is probably one of the main reasons why the radicals are successful. What happened at Bab el-Mandeb? Did the Houthis stop from shooting at ships despite American and British presence there? Probably the Americans and British don't do too much damage there. So if the United States continues to be vegetarian in the Middle East, it will lose.
So we've actually looked at a whole bunch of countries, and somebody just sent us a question and says, take a look at Egypt for us, if you would, because it seems that the reason that Egypt is so difficult right now, yes, it has a peace treaty with Israel, but Israel is uncovering not just tunnels that smuggle things, but they're uncovering a major financial scam. The Egyptians are making millions and millions of dollars through those tunnels. And that's why they're angry. And the United States is angry, and everybody's angry. Talk to us about Egypt.
Egypt,
is Israel, Egypt
first of all, Egypt is an important country. It's the largest Arab state. It has a strong military, and it is Israel's neighbor. It has a peace treaty with us, which is very important for us. And we are helping Egypt in many ways. First of all, in Washington, there is a lot of criticism in Washington about the human rights violations in Egypt, and we try to help them. And we help them in Sinai in fighting the insurgency. We have a good business in the gas area. We sell them gas, which is afterwards transported after it is, turned into liquidification to Europe. And Egypt understands that it has a lot of leeway, also vis-a-vis the Americans. The Egyptians didn't join the American organized force in the Red Sea, despite that they are losing a lot of money because many ships don't go through the Suez Canal. They lost, I believe, about half of their income from the Suez Canal. Egypt has always been playing games, like Turkey, by the way. They know how to use the outside powers in their games. And Egypt also, as I mentioned before, doesn't want a too strong Israel after all. All their military exercises have an enemy in the east. Who is in the east? It's Israel. Don't say, but the enemy is in the east. And they increase tremendously their logistical infrastructure in Sinai, preparing for a contingency in the east. So Egypt could change. We don't want it to change. It changed once. It was led by the Muslim Brotherhood in democratic elections, which the Americans supported. The Americans like democracies. They also supported the election in the Palestinian Authority, which allowed Hamas to be the winner. So I have my doubts about, the American encouragement to democracy in the Middle East, how useful it is.
Well, okay, but Hamas didn't exactly take over because of the election. They took over because they had a civil war. They wanted plurality in the Palestinian parliament.
They had a majority in parliament. And
the parliament,
Abu Mazen didn't behave in a democratic way. He didn't allow them to rule, which was fine with everybody on our side. And then Hamas got angry and used its power in Gaza to have a military coup and took over Gaza, right?
Okay, so this raises a question. Why, if you're Mahmoud Abbas and you're the PA, why would you agree to take over Gaza? You've been there. You tried to govern it. You had a civil war. You lost. Why would you go back? Even if the US wants you to, even if Israel agrees that you should, why would you want to do it? Make it Israel's problem.
First of all, they have indeed reservations. They want us, to say that it's going to be a Palestinian state. They want the world to have a Palestinian state. So they have conditions, and I can understand the reluctance. But I always have a choice. If the Americans don't bring them, the Americans want them in Gaza. Okay, it's your job to bring them. If you don't bring them, I go, and you have chaos. So I think it's an American decision. We are determined not to stay in Gaza.
Right.
This is what the Americans want. I think the notion of Israeli occupation in Gaza, it's not very pleasant to all liberals in Washington. So we are ready to go. Fine, you bring in your guys. The PA, fine with us.
So you think that the US has the ability to push Abbas to come in, push the PA to come in, even if they're hesitant, that they will have to be responsive to Biden?
I don't think Abu Mazen is ready to go to Gaza because he may be murdered there. But he has enough people that he can send to take over Gaza. And he will try. If Americans pay him enough, why not?
Okay.
I don't think we should say no to the PA. The Americans want it. Okay, you bring him. He doesn't want to. I can understand, but he wants to pay for the terrorists. He wants to pay for his, bureaucrats. He has to do something for the West.
He has to pay for his villa or multiple villas or whatever.
I think we should not, underestimate his family. He's a good family man, and he takes care of his children. And this is true of others in his coterie. So yes, fine with us. We are not against Abu Mazen's sons becoming billionaires.
So I take care of my children too, but they don't live like that. So we're coming to the end. I wish. So we're coming to the end of the program, and we didn't really talk too much about the American administration, and I think that's fine. But people who listen here know that I like to go out on a positive note. I like for the speaker to say something positive at the end. Now, one of our listeners sent us a note that says the Biden administration proposals do not represent the majority opinion in the United States. And I think that's a positive note. So, and I think he's right, by the way. I think President Biden is much more wedded to this concept of two states than American people are. And he's much more wedded to the idea that we should get along with Iran than American people are. So add to this, give us a positive note in the region that you see as an Israeli. What do you see in the region that's positive for you and for the state of Israel?
First of all, we don't choose American president. This should be clear.
Good for you.
And as a, I must say, as a fellow American, the person that wants America to be great again, it's a pity that the American political system produced these two candidates. So that's not the positive. I think that much of what will happen in the future depends on Israel. We should win the war. We can do it. And restore our deterrence. We should take care of Hezbollah. And if we are, smart enough, we should take care of the nuclear threat of Iran. I've been on the record, since 2005, that we should apply the Begin Doctrine to Iran. And I believe that this is something that is feasible and not easy, not a thing, but with enough imagination and willingness to take losses, we have to remove this threat. And again, we have to behave. We should learn from the Americans, from the cowboys in the West. That's maybe will bring us closer to the American roots as well.
Right. So that's not exactly positive, though, because it requires an awful lot of Israel in the face of enormous dangers. So can Israel do it? Is that positive? Can Israel do all of these things?
We've been always alone when fighting. We do not expect anybody to fight for us. We expect the Americans, what Churchill expected of Americans. Give us the means and we'll do the job. And I think that the war in Gaza shows quite clearly that we're not prepared for it. And I think we should prepare better using also American resources. And if the Americans conduct a wise policy, they should give us those means.
Sure. I'll take that as a positive. It's not cheerful, but you're not cheerful. I'm not cheerful either. So we'll take what we get. So I want to thank you on behalf of the people who listened and the people who are going to listen when we post this and have downloaded it, for looking at the bigger picture. There is really a bigger picture, and Israel deals with that every day. You helped us to put it in perspective, and I appreciate it, and the listeners appreciate it. Efraim Inbar, thank you very much.
Well, welcome. My pleasure.